are in Ghana, West Africa's second most populous country, to talk with the man spearheading its vaccination program, Dr. Kwame Amponsa-Achiano.
We've come a very long way using both the preventive mass campaigns and outbreak response campaigns, as well as routine immunization to limit spread.
Working with partners like WHO, UNICEF, Gavi the Vaccine Alliance, engaging communities in detailed planning has meant Ghana is seen as a success story in West Africa in the fight against the lethal disease.
I would say that Ghana has a very robust immunization system. Partnership is a central role of all our key success stories.
We also hear from the World Health Organization's immunization program lead in Ghana, Dr. Fred Osei-Sarpong.
For us, community engagement is very crucial. Once you engage communities, you're able to build trust and you're able to ensure that the vaccines that we are going to administer are accepted and that the people that we need to reach are accessible.
So, how did Ghana make this success happen? What lessons can other countries learn from their campaigns as we enter the second half of the Global Eye Strategy and its goal to eliminate yellow fever epidemics?
The risk of outbreaks of the deadly disease yellow fever is both significant and growing. This is down to a cocktail of contributing factors, including climate change and increasing pressure on land, greater movement of people, particularly into cities, and a resurgence in our highly connected world of the mosquito species that carries and transmits the disease. Yellow fever may not be the most obvious global public health threat, but it's a disease with no cure and a growing risk that must be taken seriously. We are Eliminate Yellow Fever Epidemics, that's I for short. From the world's most senior public health experts to those on the front line of combating this deadly disease wherever it emerges, we have the inside story on yellow fever's expanding global risk. This is Eye on Yellow Fever.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us for this bonus episode of Eye on Yellow Fever. My name is Ines Hamem, and I'm a part of the communications team in WHO's Regional Office for the Eastern Mediterranean. Like other West African countries, yellow fever is endemic in Ghana, with the first reported outbreak occurring in 1935. It remains a high-risk country for yellow fever. Ghana has a population of 32 million. Its neighbors are Burkina Faso to the north, Togo to the east, and Côte d'Ivoire to the west. It has a diverse landscape that ranges from coastal savannas to tropical rainforests spread over 92,000 square miles, or 238,000 square kilometers. We'll hear more about providing healthcare in this challenging environment later in this episode from both our guests. But let's start with Dr. Kwame Amponsa-Achiano, head of the expanded program on immunization for the Ghana Health Service.
We've come a very long way using both the preventive mass campaigns and outbreak response campaigns, as well as routine immunization to limit spread and protect human lives. We started many years ago with the preventive campaigns. We had to do risk assessment to identify high-risk areas. So we've done a staggered approach or a phased approach in terms of districts that needed to be tackled first. As I speak, I would say that the entire country has been covered in terms of preventive mass campaigns.
Dr. Fred Osei-Sarpong spent 11 years with the Ghana Health Service before becoming the World Health Organization's immunization lead in Ghana. He has seen how the eye strategy has developed and strengthened the country's response to the disease.
For us, community engagement is very crucial when it comes to the implementation of the eye strategy and, for that matter, vaccination response. Once you engage communities, you're able to build trust, you're able to identify barriers, and you're able to strengthen partnerships and ensure that the vaccines that we are going to administer are accepted and that the people that we need to reach are accessible.
Providing healthcare in this incredibly diverse landscape is a challenge, and when outbreaks start, they can happen in remote areas. The latest outbreak of yellow fever occurred within a nomadic community in the north of the country, a sparsely populated savanna. Dr. Kwame explains how the country responded.
Locating people is actually a very difficult thing. People hide in the bush, especially when they are nomads who have migrated from surrounding countries. You want to identify who your target should be. We were quite innovative in the approach. We had to mobilize local vaccines here and then link up with all stakeholders, including WHO, UNICEF, JSI, PATH, and of course the military. At the time, we enjoyed a lot of support from the very, very high management level, including the president himself, who, together with the Minister of Health and the Director General, arranged for us to have vaccines airlifted by the Air Force to the area where the intervention was going to take place.
Now, getting vaccines to the location is one thing, but how did health workers persuade the nomads to be vaccinated?
You need to have very clear communication objectives. What we did was, because they were mostly nomadics and herdsmen, we had to go through their local collaborators. And normally these would be butchers who would ultimately buy their cattle and so on. And so we did a lot of local interaction with the butchers and the chemical sellers, because these are people who are very elusive, because they are afraid they will be arrested, because most of them will be coming from different countries. So we needed to go through their trusted friends, those who would attend to them when they are sick. And this is the reason we went through the chemical sellers, people who sell over-the-counter medicines, and then also the butchers. So that was I would say, one of the unique approaches we used to get to the people.
Dr. Kwame stresses that ensuring community involvement at all levels is key to a successful immunization campaign. We asked Dr. Kwame about the role civil societies play and the lessons learned from their part in the mass vaccination campaigns.
We have a very vibrant civil society group who are health-oriented. It's the coalition of NGOs in health, and they support us. We plan everything with them. Quite apart from that, we operate a system called the Community-Based Health Planning and Services, CHIPS, where community health nurses are originally placed in the communities, either in the form of a zonal concept or actual buildings where the nurse lives and works with village health teams who are directly in link with the community, including the assembly members who are the political representatives, and of course, key volunteers. And so there's a linkage between the health system and then the community level through the community volunteers and then the assemblymen who are political people.
Getting political support from the top down, from the president to the assembly members, has contributed to Ghana's success. So what are the best practices in terms of communication of the vaccine campaigns? What are the key messages that the community groups pass on to their communities?
The key messages are what we have in terms of what is happening, what the effects could be, what interventions are available, and where they can get those interventions. We have a very well laid down structure, and these are usually communicated not just through formal structures, but also indirectly through churches, mosques, where they are available and where they are relevant. Sometimes we use multiple approaches, including community information centers, or which are more or less PA systems that are mounted on very long poles within the communities where broadcast of information is done. And even the health care workers themselves who move into the community. We also mostly train volunteers when it comes to specific campaigns or specific vaccination campaigns, who would go sometimes 3 or 4 days in advance to interact with the communities. And these are very good lessons that we've learned when it comes to campaign organizing.
Who are the key stakeholders in the communities, and how do you get messages across? Here's WHO's Dr. Fred Osei-Sarpong again.
The chiefs, the religious leaders, government officials, and even our own health workers, because health workers are very crucial when it comes to health matters within the community. They are a very trusted source of information. If you go there to deliver health interventions and you don't adequately engage them, they will see whatever you are doing as alien, and they may not give you the support that you need. You could do a quick and dirty survey to identify the attitudes and perceptions of people in the community regarding the intervention you are going to do, in this case, vaccination. Once you're able to identify the perception they have when it comes to yellow fever vaccination, then you'll be able to put together tailored communication strategies that will meet or that will address the concerns they have. That will be able to help generate the demand that you so much require.
And after a vaccination campaign, giving feedback to the communities is an important lesson the country has learned.
It's important that at the end of the exercise, you call a meeting, bring all of them together again, and provide them with feedback. Let them be part of your successes. If there were failures, if there were weaknesses, let them understand why these weaknesses came. If they were due to inadequate resources, let them appreciate that if they had contributed, probably you wouldn't have had these challenges. Probably every targeted person would have been reached. So this is something that we always impress on our people to do.
You're listening to Eye on Yellow Fever from the Global Coalition of Partners working together to end yellow fever epidemics by 2026. This is episode 17, meaning there is now a wealth of previous episodes for you to go and find in your podcast player. If you're discovering us for the first time, please go ahead and give them a listen. We would also love for you to spread word about the podcast. Please recommend us to friends or colleagues you think would be interested in learning more about yellow fever or have an interest in infectious diseases. Like most other countries in the world, the COVID-19 pandemic required large-scale coordination and cooperation. The country relied upon and strengthened its relationship with partners already set up to deal with yellow fever to bring the COVID vaccine to the people. Here's Dr. Kwame Amponsa-Achiano from the Ghana Health Service again.
Partnership. For us, partnership is a central role of all our key success stories. And in the midst of COVID, we had better partnership with our existing partners.
The strategies and policies put in place to deal with yellow fever laid the foundations for Ghana's response to COVID-19 and vice versa.
Very much so. Because for COVID also piggybacked on existing systems for us to do the interventions. And once COVID became established in terms of the structures, we were also piggybacking on that for other responses as well. So there are several lessons that have been learned. In terms of COVID, again, the presidency led and continues to lead the response campaign for COVID. Also, we leverage on that for the yellow fever outbreaks as well. The interministerial committee, which is made up of Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Health, key ministries of the country, education, youth and sports, and so on. And so there's been good coordination when it comes to response of that nature. We have mentioned partnership. It's been a great lesson that when we work with partners who share a common goal, you almost always will achieve the common objective.
Like many countries in Africa, the COVID-19 pandemic stretched Ghana's healthcare resources. But in many areas of the country, it dealt with the crisis by combining both COVID and yellow fever vaccination programs.
While some regions are very, very comfortable multitasking in terms of different vaccinations going on at the same time, we still have some that are not too comfortable.
COVID has taught us that hesitancy is infectious.
Dr. Fred Osei-Sarpong from WHO again.
I went to a military barracks to conduct supervision, and the vaccination team informed me that one military officer has decided not to take and has instructed all members of his family not to take the vaccine. And the reason is that we are actually trying COVID vaccine under the disguise of yellow fever. I explained the reactive campaigns the country has conducted, and that anytime there's an outbreak, a risk assessment is conducted, and if you don't go in and intervene, anybody who doesn't have any immunity against the disease, the virus will find that person. So it's important he allows us to get his family and to get himself vaccinated. I went ahead to ask whether he has traveled out of the country before. And indeed, this man had traveled and had a yellow card. He had been vaccinated before. So I told him that it's the same vaccine we are using. And there is no way that WHO or the ministry will be doing a trial of a vaccine under the disguise of another vaccine. That is unethical, and the government and WHO will never do such a thing. After a few minutes, this man actually invited the vaccination team. They got his family vaccinated. So basically, if you're able to engage people through interpersonal communication, it helps so much in getting them to understand the package of interventions we have, why they need it, and why they must take it.
Every mind changed is a victory. Dr. Fred stresses the need for constant vigilance.
We need to strengthen surveillance so that we can be able to detect additional cases. And also, we need to build capacity within our regions, within our districts, so that people go out there and actively look for cases. And then so that when we are able to mount a vaccination response, we can be able to contain the outbreak before they spread to other areas. We've also supported capacity building of laboratory officers, capacity building of staff at the EPI program, at the disease surveillance program, just to ensure that they are all equipped to be able to lead the various components of the eye strategy that their respective programs and units are leading. There's also the component of strengthening the immunization program. Since the eye strategy was developed, we have been able to support the program to review the policy on immunizations in Ghana. We happen to be in Africa, and we know very well that in our part of the world, resources are sometimes very difficult to come by. So the very little that WHO is able to mobilize really goes a long way to help improve on the immunization system, on the surveillance system, as well as the laboratory support for the implementation of the eye strategy.
Let's finish with Dr. Kwame and the assessment of the Ghana Health Service on how yellow fever is being managed in his country.
With a structured approach, we think that yellow fever is under control, but we still guard against complacency because we know that, especially in urban areas, it can be very explosive.
Like many other West African countries, Ghana is especially vigilant when it comes to its borders, through which many unvaccinated nomads travel, seeking fertile soil to feed their families and livestock.
Yes, for us as a country, and for me personally, I see boundaries as only imaginary lines. I've lived very high up in the north before. I know how it operates. No matter what kind of boundary you put there, the people are the same in terms of those who live on the other side of the border and those who live within. They are the same people. There will always be crisscrossing. If you go to the west of Ghana, which is bounded by Ivory Coast, it's the same tribe that cuts across. If you go to the east, bounded by Togo, it's the same tribes that cut across. So as for migrants, they would always come. Our policy is that it doesn't matter who you are. When there's time for vaccination, there's no discrimination. Everybody living in Ghana, whether legally or illegally, would be covered.
According to Dr. Kwame, the cost of a vaccine is small compared to the cost to the economy if Ghana fails to face up to the challenge of yellow fever epidemics.
Of course, the case speaks for itself. With the recent COVID, vaccination is the gateway to our freedom. And so the price to pay for inaction is very huge.
Thank you very much to Dr. Kwame Amponsa-Achiano and Dr. Fred Osei-Sarpong for giving us their time for this exploration of yellow fever in Ghana. An important reminder before we leave you that word of mouth is so important when it comes to reaching new audiences with podcasts. So if you have colleagues or friends who you think would find this episode useful or interesting, please let them know about us by sending them a link. You can select subscribe or follow to make sure that all future episodes of Eye on Yellow Fever are automatically downloaded directly to your device. Thank you for being with us this time. This episode was produced by Gwenda Richards with research from Alice Gray and sound design by Adam Whaley. I'm Ines Hamem. Eye on Yellow Fever is a Bengo media production for the Eliminate Yellow Fever Epidemics strategy.